This video is brought to you by BetUS. For all your sports gambling needs, use BetUS promo code Iceman. If you use the other promo codes on their website, you're going to get a split between casino and sports. If you use promo code Iceman, you're going to get 125% bonus. All sports, which is what you want. This is what we do here. And you best believe we're looking to double up. Easy work. Use promo code Iceman. All right, what's happening? So we got the picks for UFC Volkov versus Rozenstruik. And there's no fights last week, but the week before that, Holly Holm versus Ketlin Vieira. We went 7 for 7 on our male fights, 100%. And we lost on the Holly Holm Ketlin Vieira. Unfortunate decision. I got bad luck with women fights, like I told you guys. But yeah, so let's get into it. We got the first fight, Rinat for Fakhretdinov. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Russian guy versus Andreas Michelitis. So this is probably going to be most people's anchors, which if you guys don't know, like that's the guy you put on most of your parlays because you're pretty confident in him. And this is that guy. The UFC is going to try to build this guy up right here. It's his first fight in the UFC, and they're putting him up against Andreas Michelitis. So his current record, it says on the UFC ESPN it's 18-1, but I believe that is incorrect. I believe his actual record is 20 wins with 2 losses. He had a loss against Igor Sivred and Aygun Akhmadov, so 2 losses. I don't know why it says 18-1. I believe that is incorrect. Either way, impressive record. Crazy Russian dude. No one's seen him really fight before. He fought Eric Spicely, who was in the UFC. Had a pretty good jiu-jitsu game, Spicely. And Rinat just punched him out pretty quickly in under a minute. And they're giving him the right opponent too, right? Andreas Michelitis here. He's, one win in his last 3 fights, and that one win came over KB Buller, who's not really the greatest fighter. So I think they're sort of going to use this guy as a stepping stone for Rinat, and I think Rinat should get this one done. Next, we have Jeff Molina versus Zalgas Zumagulov. These names are getting harder and harder to pronounce. These crazy Russians coming over. So, Jeff Molina here, he's 10 wins, 2 losses. He's on a pretty big win streak, 9-fight win streak. His first loss was he's got 2 losses. One to Steve Morrell, which was his first fight ever, and one to Nate Smith, which was his third professional fight. And since then, he was able to round up 9 straight wins, which is pretty impressive. I remember he fought in the Contender Series against Jacob Silva, won a unanimous decision, and then he had 2 fights in the UFC. His last fight, he did get a finish over Daniel Da Silva. And the guy he's fighting is coming off a knockout loss to Manel Cape. And he's also got 1 win in his last 4 fights. So I'm probably going to go with Jeff Molina on this one. I could also see this match going over. But I don't know if I'd bet the over on this one. I'm just going to go with Jeff Molina on this one because this Zalgas guy, he's got 1 win in his last 4 fights. So I haven't been too impressed with him, so I'm going to go with Jeff Molina on this one. Next, we got Johnny Munoz versus Tony Gravely. Now, this is pretty interesting. Johnny Munoz got a pretty good record. 11 wins, 1 loss here. It's going to be his third UFC fight. His first fight in the UFC, he fought Nate Menes, and he lost a unanimous decision. It was his first fight in the UFC against a guy who was pretty good. And then he came back pretty strong against Jamie Simmons. But that Jamie Simmons guy, he's not the greatest fighter. That his last win, right? He was like 7-3, I believe, his last. Tony Gravely is a guy who's got a lot of experience, man. Almost 30 pro fights. He's also a guy that lost to Nate Menes. Yeah, this is gonna be a tough one to predict here. I think I'm gonna go with the over on this fight. Both guys being bantamweights. I know Munoz has that height advantage, slight reach advantage. However, Tony Gravely much more experienced. I think I'm gonna take the over in this fight. So that's my prediction, is the over. Next we have Nicholas Stoltz versus Benoit Saint Denis. I'm gonna go with Benoit Saint Denis. He was that guy that was like super tough. Like I remember he had a war with someone who wasn't. Leski Zaleski dos Santos, crazy Brazilian dude who like spin kicked Strickland back in the day. Yeah, he was in there taking a beating, and like even the refs were like, or the commentators were like, "Yo, you guys should maybe stop this fight." He looked like a savage. I think he was like some special forces guy, or I believe. Yeah, I'm going with this guy. Even though he lost that fight against Dos Santos, I was pretty impressed with. He took the fight, I believe, on short notice. I was pretty impressed with his performance. So, and he's fighting Nicholas Stoltz. I'm gonna go with Benoit Saint Denis on this one. Next, we have Ode Osbourne versus Zaruk Adashiv. Now, this is pretty interesting because you don't see many people in the UFC with a record of 4 wins and 3 losses unless it's in the female division. And no disrespect to any of the female fighters, you just don't see this in the male division. A guy who's got 7 fights and 4 wins, 3 losses. That's not very impressive of a record. He's fighting the Jamaican sensation, Ode Osbourne. Lost to Manel Cape. Also lost to Brian Kelleher. I remember that was his first fight in the UFC after fighting on the Contender Series. So he's 2-2 in the UFC currently. And I'm not too high on this guy. I don't think he's the next big thing at all, but I think he should probably get it done. This Zaruk guy just super inexperienced. I don't really believe this guy should be fighting in the UFC. I'm surprised the UFC even has this guy. But yeah, I'm going to go with Ode Osbourne. I can even see this fight probably going over. But I'll take Ode on this one. Man, is it just me, or like are these cards getting watered down? I don't know, or yeah, it just seems like the UFC is just signing so many names, and they've got so many shows now that they're just trying to fill up their cards with like guys like Zaruk with 4 wins, 3 losses. Like I don't think he should be fighting in the UFC right now. But next we got Joe Solecki versus Alex De Silva. Now this is interesting because Joe Solecki's a good grappler. He just beat Donald Cerrone in a grappling match, which obviously isn't too impressive. But before that, he's got some pretty big wins. His first fight on the Contender Series, he choked out James Wallace, and he beat Matt Wyman in a decision. He choked out Austin Hubbard, which was pretty impressive. Austin Hubbard was a pretty tough dude. Then he beat Jim Miller, OG in the game. Then he lost a split decision to Jared Gordon. Now, this is what worries me. Because Jared Gordon, he's on and off these days. But he's been looking not bad. And then he won a grappling match to Donald Cerrone, and now he's fighting Alex De Silva. And Alex De Silva has way more experience. Like, you got one guy who's 11 wins, 3 losses, and then you got another guy who's got 21 wins, 3 losses, which is a much more impressive. But at the same time, who's he fighting, right? And his last fight was to Brad Riddell. And Brad Riddell, you guys don't know, is teammates with Adesanya and all those guys out there in New Zealand. He's a really good striker. Actually went to a war with Fiziev, who's another savage striker. Before that, he beat Rodrigo Vargas. I remember that. He beat him in a decision. And he lost to Alexander Yakovlev in his first UFC fight. This is interesting. They're assuming Joe Solecki is going to run through Alex De Silva, minus 175. I seen him on another website. He's close to minus 200, which is interesting. Yeah, this one, I'm going to take the over. I'm going to go with the over on this one. Next, we have Alonzo Menifield versus Askar Mozarov. Now, this is interesting as well. Alonzo Menifield, he's a guy that came in with a bunch of hype. Felt like the UFC wanted to push him. He's all bodied up. He has the look, but he doesn't have the skills necessarily. His last fight, he lost to William Knight, who's a pretty tough dude himself. But before that, he won a decision against Ed Herman, and that wasn't impressive at all to me. Because Ed Herman's a guy who's just, been around the blocks a long time. They got Alonzo Menifield as a significant favorite here, which is pretty... Is this guy taking it on short notice, Askar? I remember seeing Askar Mozarov. He's coming over from bare knuckle boxing, because I remember his last fight was in bare knuckle boxing, which is pretty unique because UFC doesn't sign too many bare knuckle boxers. Usually you go from UFC to bare knuckle boxing, other than bare knuckle boxing to the UFC. But in this case, this guy's going from bare knuckle boxing to the UFC. And he's been fighting in pancration and stuff. This is a yeah, I could see why Alonzo is the favorite, because the experience factor, just UFC experience, not total fight experience. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Who should I? This one, I'm up in the air with. I was looking at this one. I just haven't seen this Askar Mozarov guy. Like, yeah, you knocked a guy out in 8 seconds in bare knuckle boxing, but this is the UFC. This is a whole nother ball game, and now you're fighting this juicehead Alonzo Menifield. I can, yeah. I'm gonna go with, Alonzo Menifield. Actually, I might have to pass on this one. This one's a tough one. This one's a really tough one. I mean, I'm not gonna bet on this one, but if I were to give you my prediction, yeah, I'll probably go with just Menifield, just because he's got that UFC experience. Yeah, I'll go with Alonzo Menifield. Next, we got Michael Trezano versus Lucas Almeida. Michael Trezano. This going to be an interesting fight. He's coming off a loss to Hakeem Dawodu, and so he's one win in his last 3 fights. He beat that Luis Pena guy. He's pretty good. Violent Bob Ross or whatever. Grant Dawson choked him out, which is... Yeah, Mike Trezano, Lucas Almeida. Let's see here. Lucas Almeida. Yeah, Lucas Almeida has one loss to Daniel Zellhuber. And then other than that, he's pretty flawless. I mean, he was 11-0 going into that fight in the Contender Series against Daniel, who's also undefeated, 11-0. He lost a decision. And then his next fight, he fought in the Jungle Fight in Brazil. Won that guillotine choke. Yeah, and Michael Trezano is a huge, huge favorite, minus 240. Jeez. Yeah, I think I'm going to take the over in this fight. I can see Trezano winning. He's obviously huge favorite for a reason. Is this guy taking it on short notice? I'm not too sure about that one. Significant strikes landed per minute, 6.4. Jeez, that's high. Accuracy is at 50%, which is also pretty 51. Like, that's pretty good. Michael Trezano, 61% at 3.5. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to go with Trezano on this one. But Lucas Almeida, I mean, don't count this guy out. At the same time, he hasn't fought in the UFC. It's hard to be the judge of that when. And his first fight on the Contender Series, he lost. But it was against an undefeated guy. So, yeah, I wouldn't bet big on Michael Trezano if you're feeling Trezano. Maybe take the over in this one. Next is the co-main event of the evening. Dan 50K Ige versus Movsar Evloev. And I like this Movsar Evloev guy. He's Russian, really good grappler. Strong grappling background. This is going to be interesting. 15-0. I remember I had him, or he was supposed to fight Ilya Taporia. He was an underdog going into that fight. Now, huge favorite, minus 400. And I think the reason is because Dan Ige sometimes has a problem with guys who are really good grapplers because, yeah, he got a knockout over Gavin Tucker, but at the same time, I don't think he's going to knock out Movsar Evloev, and I give the grappling advantage probably to Movsar Evloev. And Dan Ige has a problem with better grapplers than him. But at the same time, man, plus 310, this guy's minus 400. They think Dan Ige is going to get murked. And I don't believe that's the case. I think he's going to lose, don't get me wrong. But I do think this fight will go to the distance. Dan Ige's tough as nails. Hard to finish, right? He went decision with Chan Sung Jung, Josh Emmett, Calvin Cater. Beat Edson Barbosa, even though I thought Edson probably won that fight, but it was a close split decision loss. They're counting out Ige big time in this fight. Almost disrespectful. Yeah, I think obviously, minus 400. No surprise who you guys think I'm probably going to side with, Movsar Evloev. But at the same time, I think the decision, Movsar Evloev by decision, is probably a better bet. Because I don't think he's going to knock out Ige, and I don't think he's going to submit Ige. Yeah, if he wins, it'll probably be by submission if he's gonna get the finish. But I think it's probably gonna go the distance. So that's my bet. Movsar Evloev by decision. Next, we have the main event of the evening: Alexander Volkov versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, this is going to be interesting. Very interesting. When I first saw this matchup, when I seen the odds, I'm like, ooh, I can see Jairzinho knocking Volkov out. I can see that. But at the same time, you start to look at the height and the reach. And, Volkov is a really good striker. I mean, if I were to say the holes in Volkov's game, it's got to be his grappling. I mean, he's got a pretty good chin. He's only been knocked out 2 times in like 45 pro fights. The guy's got 45 pro fights. The only guy to knock him out was Derek Lewis in the UFC. And then before that, I think it was Vitaly Minikov, which was, 9 years ago. But one of his most impressive wins was against Alistair Overeem. Volkov knocked out Overeem in the second round, which is impressive because Alistair Overeem, obviously he's not the same guy he used to be, the Ubereem, all juiced out. But man, the fact that he went in there and knocked out a guy like Overeem, and he lost to Cyril Gane, which is, number one striker in the heavyweight division. So expect him to lose that. He lost to Curtis Blades, and he lost to Tom Aspinall. Now that's the fight that worries me because he did not look good at all against Tom Aspinall. But at the same time, he got taken down and submitted with a straight armbar by Tom Aspinall. Jairzinho Rozenstruik is not going to take Volkov down and submit him with a submission. He doesn't do that. He's a kickboxer. He's been kickboxing his whole life. He's not a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's not even a blue belt in jiu-jitsu probably. So I can see this fight standing, but at the same time, do you really want to stand with Jairzinho Rozenstruik? He got knocked out by Nagano, he lost to Gane, and he lost to Curtis Blades, which is, all top 5 guys. Those are top 5 guys in the UFC heavyweight division. This is going to be a tough one. Yeah, I'm going to go with Volkov on this one. Like I said, when I first saw the matchup, I thought Jairzinho it's gonna be a stand-up match, and I'm like, man, Jairzinho hits fucking hard, which he does. He's got crazy power. Yeah, he does have crazy power. If he could, all he needs is one to land. That thing is, Volkov's gonna be super hungry. He's got so much more experience than Jairzinho, especially in MMA. And let's say the fight does end up in the clinch, and it does go to the ground. I mean, I'm going to give the advantage to Volkov in that situation. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Alexander Volkov, but at the same time, hasn't been looking good. Like his last fight. Maybe Tom Aspinall is that good on the ground. Yep, my pick is Alexander Volkov, and don't be surprised if this fight goes into the later rounds. Do not be surprised. I know you guys see, it's heavyweight. It's going to end in the first round. Not so fast. Not so fast. Watch Andrei Arlovsky fight. He hasn't been finishing people. So just because they're heavyweights doesn't mean it's going to end early. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes it does. But yeah, I think that height and reach advantage of Volkov is going to give Jairzinho some problems. Yeah, I don't see Jairzinho even throwing too many kicks either. He's a guy who's really punch heavy. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Volkov on this one. But yeah, man, do you guys think the UFC's been watering down cards or what? Because these cards have not been looking good. Even though sometimes your main event might be the prelim fight that you bet your most money on. So to you, that's your main event. But for the most part, like, I'm not too impressed with these cards, man. Not impressed at all. But maybe this is just the appetizer for next week's pay per view, which is going to be a banger between Teixeira and Prohaska. But yeah, no ice picks, obviously on this card. But give you my predictions, and I got a few guys that I'm putting my bet on. They are Russians, but yeah, man. Good luck. This video is brought to you by ThriveFantasy. ThriveFantasy is a daily fantasy sports and esports app for player props. So if you guys are into fantasy MMA, fantasy NBA, fantasy NHL, stuff like that, you're going to want to use Thrive Fantasy. Use promo code Iceman when you sign up today, and you will receive a 100% instant first deposit match. So if you deposit $100, they will match you $100. Download the Thrive Fantasy app on the App Store or Play Store, or by visiting thrivefantasy.com.